Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Augustus Umelu, a manager here at UNICOM Seminars. We are pleased to be hosting a webinar this afternoon titled The Challenges of Managing Multiple Application Testing Projects, Mess of Many, the Simplicity of One. The webinar is presented by Becky Wetherill, Senior Product Manager at Borland. Working within the product management at Borland, Becky is responsible for the strategy and direction for test management and functional mobile test solutions within Borland. With over 17 years of IT experience, Becky not only provides strategy and direction with the products, but supports both the field and sales organization around software quality assurance. Becky has a strong focus on the qualitative aspect of software delivery, and for the last 14 years has specialized in integrating processes and tooling to help organizations increase quality in their software. At this point, I would like to hand over to Becky. There will be opportunities for questions and answers at the end of Becky's presentation, including feedback as well of how the session went. Over to you, Becky.
Thank you very much. So welcome everybody to today's presentation, where we're going to talk through, as been indicated, around the subject of mess of many and the simplicity of one. So in today, let's just start talking about, well, what is the software development trends and evolutions that we're seeing? I think we see a number of different process trends within industry. We see how there's a number of trends around the adoption around Agile and how Agile is impacting how people do their development. We see the fact around legacy rehosting, revamping applications, and how organizations have a drive to outsource some of their technologies, their testing, their development, and when we say outsource, that may be outsourcing to companies, as well as the consideration of areas such as crowdsourcing. So that's just really around process. From a technology trend point of view, we see that social media and how tools evolve is really being driven, and the key thing is to have applications which are developed which really are there and able to be available within mobile devices and developed using technologies which gives that flexibility of how applications are developed with things such as HTML5. Within organizations, no longer is it only the case that as an organization they say, here is a device that you use and that is the only type of device from a certain manufacturer that you'll work on. We see more and more organizations having to consider facts where it's bring your own device and you choose your device, especially around smartphones. And that obviously can then add the complexities around how you actually do that mobile device management. More and more organizations also look at how you virtualize your solutions and how you free up the infrastructure, and you use concepts such as cloud computing. Now around the business trends, the rate of change and how really consumers are driving what they expect in applications still remains key, and how really software is moving forward. So around development and delivery, we see the constant and ongoing challenges around the delivery and the different types of problems that persist. When we look at how many projects truly succeed, we see typically 37% of projects may truly succeed, but that really means that remaining 63% of projects have different issues, and that does remain a challenge, and people are constantly therefore looking to improve the quality of how they deliver while obviously not raising the cost of the delivery. So you're looking at really how to reduce costs, increase quality, reduce time, and obviously the expansion of the scope, because the variety of types of applications and how you need to test really continues to extend. We need to deal with the fact of how do we really improve the level of projects that succeed and really deal with the project failure rate. And around all of this means that there's obviously a level of confidence that people feel against their projects and how they succeed delivering their applications. Now, with the current market and with how it is that we're working with, mobile devices and what people expect, it really is about the age of the consumer. If we look at how things have moved over since the 1900s, we see that, age of manufacturing, people defined what was created, mass manufacturing of different types of, whether it be cars and industrial aspects. Then you look at how the age of distribution and how global connections and transportations, made distribution key, through to the age of information, moving to IT technology, and how that information flow really dominated aspects. With nowadays, what we're really looking at with the age of the consumer is its consumers are empowered buyers, and they demand really how applications are available. You can't really choose any longer should you develop your application to be available on a mobile device. Consumers expect it. So it really just change the behavior of how you really need to drive things forward. Now, is the age of consumer good or bad? More consumer choice means obviously there's a better quality of service, and it means that customers really do drive obviously how things move forward, but it's getting more difficult for organisations to actually deal with this more consumer choice and the different variety of information. People demand more applications and more devices, and this adds to complexity, and it really does increase the volume in what we need to test. By client demanding and really expecting applications to be available on the wider platforms, it means that as an organisation, I've got to test against more browsers, more devices, more platforms, and it's more end pressure to really achieve that level of quality and support the latest things. And in doing this, it can lead to product support issues, and if you don't do it right, consumer loss, because that expectation of quality really does remain key. And with this, looking at, your subject matter experts, so the reuse of skills can become difficult. Is it the same type of skills that you needed for developing traditional applications through to actually how you develop for the mobile world and the variety of different browsers? The design and code elements can no longer be reused, and this is where it can come into your choice of technology, your choice of language as to how it is that you develop to really allow that portability from across different types of devices. But ultimately we end up with a situation where one product actually becomes multiple products in how it's portrayed. So it does require more developers with different skill sets, and can, if you don't do it in the right way, bring less reuse. And all of this, we really do look at the quality issues. And with what we talked on the more client demands, the fact that people expect it to be available across all the browsers, devices and the platforms, it does mean that we have exponentially more things to test. And with this aspect where we have more things to test, it means that we need then the necessary environments and support to really be able to do that testing across browsers and devices. And what this can result in is it can challenge you as an organisation to really deliver the testing and the products in the right timeframes, and it can result in product delays, and if you don't do it right, that negative feedback from customers and therefore cost overruns. Now what we do see is mobile testing is increasing. We see now, and this is an example from a 2014 survey, which was the State of Retailing online survey that was performed by Forrester. And what this really did highlight is it highlighted that the top priority for web retailers is now actually the mobile space with 53%. And it really is about dealing with the fact of where they look at where you actually purchase and different transactions, mobile is really taking the lead forward. Now when we look back at our applications, in the past we may have only had X number of browsers, so we could actually set that up ourselves on our machines. And with this we could then go through the different functionality and we could actually perform the testing in that environment. And with this it meant a smaller distribution and a smaller footprint, which meant more time to develop the features. You don't need as big a team and you need less QA. Now an organisation could focus on building their application IP and being an expert against those different browser types. Now unfortunately for our developers nowadays, the world isn't quite so simple. So now what we deal with and what happened is the explosion of the different types of devices. From, if we look at Firefox, 200 plus configurations, we look, or 300 plus configurations, and the different numbers of operating systems that are available. So now it's a case of with applications being developed that are more user-friendly with Web 2.0 applications, they really work cross-device. With applications being web-based, cloud-based, again, adds to this with the different types of browsers and the different types of consumers. So really the bottom line is there's far too many browsers and mobile browsers that really can overwhelm the web teams, and it really means that then with what you have to focus on, you may need to look at changing the scope or increasing the time or cost in your project, ideally not decreasing the quality. Now some of the unacceptable trade-offs are, well, do you limit then your testing? Do you then just focus on a core number of areas? And you do hear concepts out there such as edge testing, limited testing, which is really then about prioritizing to go with a top X number of devices or infrastructures. And that can be an approach depending on the organization. Do you hire more resources, and do you actually therefore hand the application out for crowdsourcing? And this is something around which can work and support some organizations. And obviously delaying product releases isn't something you want to do. If you haven't got enough time to actually test everything, what is the risk to your image that you have within your organization? And the harsh reality is you need to test all your applications and all the supported web browsers and all the supported mobile devices. So how is it you sort of really look at doing this? Because you have so many that you need to set up, and you may not have the time and the infrastructure available to you necessarily. Where physically do you set it up? Now that's just about browsers, and then you bring on top of that from the traditional desktop browsers into the mobile browsers across the different device types. Now one of the things that we do see, and I think for the first time early 2014 in January, we showed in the US that for the first time the mobile web access exceeded that of desktop web access, and that's quite significant. It really does show the focus on the growth of mobility and the need to keep up with this. Now again, when we look at the growth of mobility, we see the number of different types of devices that are available and the revenue that comes in across those devices. And we see that mobile devices, consumers spend 86% of their time in applications and driving revenue over the mobile web. We see, as just some other stats, we see that typically the top 3 OSs that we focus on being Android, iOS, with then Windows Phone. The volume of different tablet applications and mobile applications being downloaded is really increasing year on year, and we expect by 2017 there'll be more than 200 billion downloads per year. Now, as I've already mentioned, when we look at mobile maturity, what we have seen is that there is an increase in how organizations focus around the mobile space. We see that in 2012 only 31% of organizations had a mobile test strategy. In 2013, we saw this increase to 55%. And again, when we look at the numbers when they're released for 2014, we expect then to see that increased again. Now, how important is it that you achieve quality, and how important is it in how this affects your organisation, your business? Now, so if we look at how do your mobile app ratings impact revenue, there are stats out there that sort of say if you have a 2-star rating and you're able to improve that to a 4-star rating, that can achieve a revenue growth of 5 times your revenue. So it really is a case of the review and the quality of your applications delivered to mobile really does impact the quality perceived by the customer. If you lose downloads, you lose customers, and that can achieve negative ratings, and depending which your business focus is, does that mean that people then look at an alternate vendor? We've looked at the fact that it's very key for especially retailers which have a strong focus in developing mobile, that in the past they weren't necessarily focused on how people perceive their mobile apps, but now we see some of the major vendors in the US really starting to actually pick this up and actually look at improving the quality. So bearing in mind that the ratings improve revenue, again where they've had their apps rated as a 1-star, really needing to drive that quality forward. So what is it we can do, some of the practical steps? So when you're developing your mobile applications, it's about implementing a framework for reuse. And this is where really the HTML5 really comes in play. It's about developing a good framework which will then allow you to develop applications that can then be ported and available across device. So this allows you to really build cross-browser and device solutions, which then allows you to leverage good reuse of your code while eliminating the burden on the quality team. So you're going to develop something once and then also be able to use tooling that allows cross-browser testing. And with this cross-browser testing, it's about then allowing you to really capture your script on one type of browser and then replay that across your different browsers, whether that be IE, Firefox, your Android browser or your iOS browser. It's a single script that allows you to then replay across devices. And it's about then that being able to then support you testing within your own physical environment or also using virtual environments such as cloud environments or virtual VM environments with that flexibility to use cross environments. So by implementing a framework for UI reuse, it's about you being able to create the right types of containers, components that really then allows you to really drive that forward in how those applications are developed. And Gartner really predicts that HTML5 will deliver 50% of applications that in the past would have been native. So native means obviously less portability and it's going to support less of the technology. It's about then doing mobile device specific design, template and commercial, and it's about then that HTML5 providing that framework to really allow it working cross device. The framework benefits really is about moving from how it previously worked with Xcode, Java, C#, etc. to really driving the HTML5 forward with the JavaScript code to really provide containers that adapt to the application and adapt to the device. And that really again supports the maintainability and the portability message to really improve your development, to support the growing volume of devices and OSs that we need to support. Now when we're building these applications and needing to have those solutions that does that cross-browser configuration testing, this is where being able to actually capture a transaction against a single web browser really then allows you to then capture this in your end user fashion and be able to then run this across your configuration, and as I mentioned earlier, whether that be your physical infrastructure in your environment or using virtualized solutions such as maybe VMware or Amazon Cloud etc. So about having those environments available for you to actually do that execution. So that simple fact that you can create a single script to do that end-to-end testing really then means that what we see on the right would say Silk Central Connect. You've captured your script once, you've replayed it, and you've chosen your end infrastructure to replay this against. You get that side-by-side results analysis, which gives you, well, how did it behave across those devices. And at the bottom we see Silk Mobile, where we again capture on a single device and we can then replay cross device. So what does good look like? It's about really creating scripts that allow us to be able to create the script once and then be able to reuse that across the different platforms. It's about being able to connect to scalable infrastructure. So with the volume of different types of OSs and infrastructure that you need to look at, is it realistic you have that all within your environment? And depending on what you focus on, that may be the case, but it's the ability to extend that to connect to the cloud and really ramp up your capacity to support that. If we looked at this from a performance test point of view, it's really about then you're going to have a level of what you need to do as performance as standard, but being able to do that peak load in the necessary environment. Be able to choose the platforms that you test. So it's really about, again, do you test everything, or do you test what your business priority is and your business focused and your target of what you need to run your application against, dealing with the fact that whether you choose to support an OS and an application, your consumers may try and actually have that application available on the device. Being able to validate initial scans, to really do that pre-testing, to quickly say, well, how is my application going to display against the different browsers? So just being able to do some of those pre-checks and being able to schedule and run this in a controlled way to give the right results and analytics to allow you to make those informed decisions. So really the growth of mobile devices does impact testing, and it does mean that you do need to have the right test strategy. And we've seen how, organizations move to having a stronger defined mobile strategy is increasing, and we see this moving forward more. Organizations are now actually saying, okay, well, we need to have a strategy. We need to define what it is we're going to test manually, what it is that we're going to have automated test sets for. As with core testing, mobile testing still is the same. You will still have some manual tests as well as automated tests. It's about ensuring that you have then the right test lab environment, which is able to then support real devices or emulators, whether that then be jailbroken devices or non-jailbroken devices. Within your organization, you need to understand, well, what's the security and compliance in regulations you need to take into account. And some of this does start then impacting where is your environment sit, what type of devices do I use. If you have an environment where you need to maintain security for what is available on that device, then you need to have a private environment. It needs to be within your physical environment. By testing against real devices versus emulators, you really are testing against what your end users truly see. And this really then leads to, again, if you're testing on non-jailbroken, non-rooted devices, you test the device and the application, again, in the way your end users would work. If you're going to look at testing jailbroken or or rooted devices, you do potentially have the challenge that the application can perform differently in your testing to how it would with your end users, because you're really opening up far more lower and granular level control into that device and into the OS than the end users would see. So with mobile and the speed that you need to do your testing and getting your applications out, implementing continuous integration testing. So being able to have and drive your testing forward to support really an agile way of working. Being able to test your nightly builds, your nightly deployments of your applications. So really bringing your mobile testing into your continuous integration test approach. So really testing early, testing and to ensure that you're validating as early as possible you're meeting your business needs. So testing and monitoring your applications across the diversity of handsets relevant to your business. As an organisation, you will know who your audience is targeting to be, and you're going to really prioritise the devices according to that. Now, the top priority devices are those that you're mostly going to focus on being real devices versus emulators. Those that may be a lower priority, you may say you'd use emulators for. And whilst a lot of what we've talked about is focusing on functional testing, it's key to also bring in performance testing as early as possible. So taking then into consideration the providers and the infrastructure and the environments that could impact your application. So again, whilst you're bringing your functional testing into your continuous integration test approach, bring your performance testing in as early as possible, focusing then on the different types of network speed, the latency, the network providers that can impact your application. If a connection goes down, how does that impact your application? And one of the things, we see new OSs coming out to the market, new devices. iOS recently launched, and organizations try to look at how can you do early testing against these OSs and devices. So understanding again how can you do this, and this can be where emulators can play a part. But overall, it's about across the whole of your mobile testing with the variety of configurations and testing that you need to perform, ensuring collaboration and control to really ensure you've got that centralized metrics and analytics to be able to make that informed decision. So, again, around the different challenges, we talked a little bit about diversity in device management. We've talked about the fact that how it is that you handle the applications and different platforms has different ways of working, the different factors, no standardization of devices, form factors, and the different complexities that come in. So, and that is then about the languages that you choose to use and how you're developing them. Around your application usage, I think one of the things that comes in that does impact testing, which didn't affect more of the desktop type application, is the application usage. People expect it to be available on your device anytime, anywhere. Different types of input mechanism as to how you interact with the applications, how you use your keypad, voice, different touch and gesture support, all needs to come into play with how it is that you develop your applications. And all of that is a case then, do you develop your mobile apps in the same way that you would have your desktop app? Typically the answer is no. It's going to be a different approach to how you develop your mobile app, but also needing to understand there how it interacts with native and third-party applications that you may not have necessarily on desktop. And as I say, again, the complexity of the gestures and multi-touch. Now, we briefly touched on the need for doing your performance testing, so just a little bit more around the performance aspect. So the network considerations obviously are dealing with your network speeds and the variable reception. So being able to test against those different things with the unpredictable network latency, which can lead to inconsistent data transfer and speed. So with this, dealing with, well, how do your applications work, maybe online, offline? The different device security, so how it deals with the data storage, how it deals with the session handling. And again, leading to when we talked about continuous integration testing, talking about the rapid application testing. Consumers won't necessarily wait 6 months or a year for an application for a mobile device. They really do look for the shorter release cycle to actually have applications available. And that, of course, then reduces your testing window and therefore means you need to deliver quality apps in a shorter time frame. So it does drive you moving from more of a traditional development approach through to agile methodologies. And we've seen examples with customers where, and this is a customer that's dealing with credit card processing, the different types of devices and browsers that they worked in, when they were doing their testing manually or with applications, the product delays and cost overruns were high. By moving to having the right strategy and approach in place around mobile and the functional automation, they were able to really reduce the cost and time for the project, achieving a higher level of quality and accelerating the project deliveries. So on the right hand side in the grey box is where we see what their testing was previously, which was their device and browser testing costs were unpredictable. By having that strong strategy and the right automation approach, they really did manage to pull that in and really gain great savings and benefits, but also the predictability. So out of this, this organisation was able to really go from a 20% coverage to 100% coverage by extending how it was they did their testing, bringing in the use of virtualization solutions, and by transitioning more from manual to automated testing around these solutions, they were able to reassign how their testers worked and really then allow their manual testers to focus on the critical areas that needed the manual testing and really take the most work then under the automation. So it's now about the customers able to focus on building great products instead of dealing with the complex infrastructure needs. So what customers really do look at is, after we've talked all about that, is they need to deal with the fact of demanding customers can cause chaos to how it is you need to deliver your applications. By having then the right processes and practices to be able to deal with that complex infrastructure. Being able to have the right foundations and frameworks to really help, and having the right skills, scripts and technologies to really move this forward. So having the right solutions that enable cross-browser testing really can save your costs by up to 80%. Being able to capture a script on one type of browser and straight away reuse that across the different browsers in desktop through to the mobile space, again, means that portability and maintainability within your testing. And all of that is going to save time for how you configure your environments, you do your testing, you set up your infrastructure, and obviously execute your tests. So by doing that and supporting that within your physical environment as well as virtualized environment. And all of this really does then drive to improve customer experience and therefore customer satisfaction and the quality of what you're doing. And this is about then future-proofing against your new clients, devices and technologies. And it's just some examples of customers that we work with across US and Europe. Okay, so as we're just wrapping up, so just one of the things just to highlight, Borland's been recognised as a leader for the third year running in the Magic Quadrant with Gartner, which is great news. One of the things you'll be able to do is you'll be able to visit the borland.com website and look at some of the solutions that we help manage the different challenges around cross-browser and mobile configuration testing, specifically Silk Central Connect, Silk Mobile for the functional testing, and Silk Performer for your mobile performance testing needs. So at this point, just like to hand it over and open it up for Q&A. So one of the questions that we've just received in is how many device types and operating systems does a typical organisation test against? Is it 3 to 4, or what is it that we're actually looking at? We do see organisations that really try to test across all different OSs in the mobile space, from Android, iOS, Windows Phone, Windows Mobile, and BlackBerry. But typically what we are seeing is organizations are focusing on Android and iOS, with then, if they're choosing a third one, it typically being between Windows Phone, Windows Mobile and BlackBerry. So we see typically an organization focusing on 3 different OSs within the mobile space. So I hope that answers that question. Another question that we've had submitted is, are there best practices guides to setting up and testing devices, or does it depend on usage scenarios and business baselines? I think there always is a best practice guide as to what it is that you should be testing within the mobile space and the applications, but I think then some of it will depend on the type of application and obviously the user scenarios and the business baselines. What we shouldn't forget is that mobile testing still needs to ultimately relate back to what is the business need and the business scenario. So being able to then test against that user case and the business requirement. Another question that we have is, when measuring load on an application, what are the key things to watch for? So I think load and application, some of the key things to test, look for in the mobile space is really the impact of the network provider, as well as the latency. So really taking that into account as to how that then affects that application and the performance. So that's 2 of the things that I'd highlight. So that's the questions that we've just had highlighted. So another question that we've had asked is, well, what's the percentage of manual and automated testing? And I think one of the challenges that we still see is we still see 70 to 80% of testing being performed manually. Now, with the need to deliver mobile applications in a more rapid point, we see organizations really looking at putting the right mobile automation strategy in place to increase the level of automation. So whilst we're still seeing, and we still see from the analyst point of view, that they still say it's largely manual, there's a great drive to actually move to better automation using the right automation tools. So thanks for that question. So another question we've got is, are there any mobile testing standards or best practices that can be referenced to wraparound tools and processes? And I think, again, sort of this links to one of the earlier questions around best practice guides to setting up your tests. There are different standards out there from some organisations that focus around mobile testing that do give guidance on the types of tests you need to focus on within the mobile space. And that's something we can follow up with and share with you afterwards. But I think the key thing is, whilst mobile testing does have slight nuances of what you need to also test because of how mobile devices deal with gestures and the different types of interaction and the different types of infrastructure need, from the performance aspect of your network latency, your network provider, and etc., it really just adds to typically some of the other types of testing that you'd perform. So some great questions that came in there. Any further questions?
Yeah, if there are no further questions, I guess that concludes today's webinar session. We would like to thank Becky again for a very insightful presentation. We welcome feedback from all the participants, and we also like to thank everyone for joining today. and we'll also be making a link of the webinar recording available online. Thanks everybody, and hope to see you soon on another webinar. Thank you.